Team 1, stand by. Copy. Team 1, standing by. Breach, breach, breach.
Earlier on in my career, I was a new supervisor and currently training somebody at the time. This individual, I was, kind of giving the tour, taking around, showing, where some of the places in our area were that were of noteworthy. And while we were at one place, we were taking the tour and seeing what they did there and things like that. And a call come out, and the call was for a 7 or 8 month old child that had drowned. We weren't too far from the call, and we left where we were, headed to where the call was. Get there, park out in the driveway, run up to the house, and like most people, we ran to the front door because that's where it's common to go to a house, and knock on the door, grab the doorknob, and nothing. The door is locked. So I'm beating on the door, and I'm yelling loudly who we are, and I hear a voice from inside, and hear heavy footsteps come across the floor, and the door snatches open, and me and the person I was training, come rushing in, asking, where the child is. Person points over to a counter, says, "He's over there. He's over there." So, we rush over, and, we train. We train a lot for the jobs we do. Doesn't matter what your job is, you train for it. We're, the same. We train for these things. Especially being in public safety and in a first responder, you're trained to get there and start handling the situation. However, my brain wasn't ready. My brain wasn't ready for what I was about to see. When I looked toward this countertop and started moving towards it, it was a baby. We say 7, 8 month old baby, and a lot of times people's minds can go right to it, but my brain hadn't pictured it yet. It hadn't pictured how small this human being was, how small this child was. I'm not small, and seeing this 8 month old baby, even if having kids of my own, my brain immediately went, "Oh crap. Holy crap." So I run over to this baby and immediately notice that the child is starting to turn blue from the mouth down, and felt for a pulse. He had a pulse. However, he wasn't breathing. I would get an occasional, strong gasp of air, just, and then nothing, no exhale. At least it seemed like there was no exhale, no nothing. And, it was obvious in that moment that this baby was in distress. The baby's starting to turn blue from lack of oxygen, the distressed breathing. The heartbeat was there, but it wasn't, very strong. And, I'm trying to go back to my training, and I had only done at this point, I'd had CPR classes and everything like that, but I'd only done CPR on the CPR mannequins, the little upper torso that you do your compressions on, and you get the little clicks when you're going deep enough on the compression, and the little child that you're holding in your arm and you're flipping them over and you're giving them the chops in the back when they've got something lodged in their throat, and the 2 fingers and the whole thing. Any of you guys that have been through CPR, you know what I'm talking about. That's the only place I'd ever done CPR. I'd never done CPR on another living being a day in my life. And truth be told, I really hoped I would never have to, because obviously I took the training serious, but I didn't feel qualified. I didn't feel qualified to be responsible for trying to bring someone, back to life, so to speak, or, help them stay alive. didn't feel qualified for that. That wasn't the job that I primarily trained for. But here I am in this situation, and this 8-month-old baby, this 7/8-month-old baby is laying there and needs somebody. And it was me. It was me and my trainee. So, as fast as my brain can process what I need to do, check the pulse, check the respirations, and immediately I start giving chest compressions. That was what they taught us. Go ahead and start giving chest compressions. So I was giving chest compressions and tilting the head and putting my mouth over the baby's nose and mouth and giving rescue breaths, going back to giving chest compressions. And guys, I don't really know how to express it when the first time you do CPR, it's on a child that's that small, and you're taking your hands, and my hands are fairly big, and you're taking your hands and you're taking 2 fingers and you're covering up that child's chest. Not the whole chest, but you're covering that child, a large portion of that child's chest just with your fingers. And you're having to make sure that you're pressing in on that child's chest just enough, but not too much. And I'm sitting here doing this to this baby, and again, I would get the occasional gasp, just, and then nothing. And the whole time I'm going, come on, buddy, come on, stay with me, come on, keep coming. I need you to come on, breathe, 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 buddy. And it felt like an eternity that I'm sitting here doing these chest compressions on this child. Time just kind of stopped. Nobody else was coming. Everybody else had been dispatched, but nobody else was coming. At least that's how it felt. And in the moment, it was just me and this baby. It was me and this baby in this moment, and this baby was relying on me, of all people, to help him stay alive. So I kept going. Eventually, I heard another first responder get on scene, and I know this man. I know that he has more training in what I'm dealing with than I do. So when I hear that he's on scene, my brain immediately goes, thank God, somebody else that's better qualified to help this baby is finally here. My friend comes in the door. He comes running in, and he says, Brian, where you at? I'm over here. He immediately comes over to me, and he takes out a stethoscope and he starts listening for a heartbeat. But he does something I didn't expect. He didn't tell me to move. He didn't tell me I got it. Nothing. He says, okay, keep going. And while my actions didn't stop, my brain meant, what do you mean keep going? No. It's not keep going. This is this you're the hero now. This is where you step in, and this is where you save this baby's life, because I'm not capable. I'm not capable of saving this child's life. You need to do this. This is what's going through my brain while I'm sitting here with this small child. And I'm continuing, and I'm giving the breath sounds, and the rescue breaths. And every time I would give a breath, my buddy would say, you got good breath sounds, keep going. So I would keep going, and I keep pressing on this child's chest. And again, time just stands still. There's nobody else coming. It's just us. It's me, who is woefully unqualified to be doing this on this small child, and my buddy, who's giving me encouragement and telling me, keep going. And the only thing I can say while I'm doing chest compressions on this small child is, come on, buddy, come back to us. Come on, little guy. Come on, buddy. I'm begging him. I'm begging him to take a breath. I'm begging him to start breathing, because I can't do this. I'm not ready to be responsible for this baby like this. But no one else was. So I keep going. Eventually I hear the ambulance pull up, and I hear other people get there. And as soon as I heard the ambulance get here, my buddy says, "Okay, Brian, the ambulance is here." I couldn't sit there and know that I wasn't doing any good for that baby anymore. And I scoop up this baby and I go running out the door. I run out the front door, down the wooden steps, across the yard. And by the time I got to the ambulance, the EMTs were already in the back, and they had opened up the door and were standing there with their arms open. And all I could think was, thank God, save this baby. And I run up to the door and I hand the baby off, and I don't say anything else. I just hand the baby off, and they immediately go back inside the ambulance, shut the door, and they go to work. And, I go back towards the residence. The ambulance eventually takes off, running lights and sirens towards the hospital. And we're left there. Some of this, especially because it's been so long, is kind of a blur at this point. I do know that we went back in and we spoke with the male that was there, interviewed him to see what all had happened. And according to him, he was given both children. There was this 8-month-old baby, and there was another child there. He was given both of these children a bath, and while doing something with the other child, this 7-8-month-old baby slipped below the water, but just for a moment. And while I'm doing this interview, after everything that I just did, which wasn't much, and I don't mean to make it seem like I did anything, because to me, I did absolutely nothing for that child. But my brain's processing this, and I said, wait a minute, that baby was in that bad a shape after just a brief moment. Like, how long is a brief moment? And my brain's going back through what I saw and what I processed and everything in those moments that I was there doing CPR on this baby. The baby was already in a diaper, and the baby's hair was dry. I know the baby's hair was dry because I had to, do the chin lift. I had to raise the baby's chin up, and my hand went through the baby's hair as I caressed its head so that I could lift its chin up. And that hair was dry. The male that was there was wrapped in a towel when I first got there, but this baby was not wet. This baby, dry hair and in a diaper. If a baby goes under the water, and granted, this is my rational mind or irrational mind at the moment, but if a baby goes under the water and then, briefly and then stops breathing, who takes the time to put a diaper on it? Of course, I'm thinking about these things, but nothing's really registering. So we're there, and we wait for investigators to get to the scene because it's, an incident that involves a child. And the investigators get out there and they start doing their job. And at this point, I'm just glad everybody else is there, because I really don't want to do anything now. My brain just keeps flashing back to what I saw, which was this small baby, sitting on this countertop, starting to turn blue and gasping for air, and not even like repeated gasping. It was, it felt like minutes between a gasp of air. So I know this baby's brain was getting starved of oxygen too. So I didn't want to have to deal with anything. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to talk to the guy that was there. No one. I briefed the investigators. I talked with my trainee, and, it was just kind of a sit and wait kind of moment. When you get in those situations, you don't just get up and leave. You have to wait around. The investigation is ongoing, and especially when the scene is fresh, you're there. So we had to stay there. And I don't know how much longer afterwards, but one of the investigators came up and he showed me a picture. And he said, "Is this how this baby looked when you got here?" And when I looked at the picture, all I saw was deep blue, deep blue, almost purplish um, discoloration from the top of the lips down. And immediately I panicked. Obviously the baby had started to turn a little bit blue, but it was like the lips. It wasn't much more than the lips. But they're showing me this picture of this baby, and this baby looks like his face from his lips down, to his chin are bruised. And the only thought that goes through my mind is that's not how that baby looked when I got there. And then my brain goes to, you were doing CPR on that child and you had to put your mouth over that child's nose and mouth. Did you do this? Did you just hurt this child more than what it was already having to deal with? And I started to panic because now, all I wanted to do was try to save this baby's life. And in looking at this picture, all I could see was that all I did was hurt this baby. And I remember looking at the investigator going, oh my God, did I do that to that child? And he said, no, I need you to calm down and look at this picture. Is this how the baby looked when you got here? I said, no, I need to know, did I do that to that child? He said, no, you didn't do this to this child. Right now, we're investigating this as a child abuse case. And I kind of stopped. And I said, do what? I said, the guy said the baby went under the water. He goes, Brian, I know. But we're investigating this as a child abuse case right now. I said, but he said the baby went under the water. Now, mind you, my brain's already processed that the baby's hair was dry, was in the diaper, all of these other things. But in that moment, especially after seeing that picture of this child whose face looked bruised, I'm forgetting all of that. My brain's not processing logically anymore. Now my brain's going back to what the initial call was, what I did, what I just saw in that picture. So my brain's not processing it. And I was just confused. So we go through the rest of the scene and we finish up just like we would any other scene, go back to the office, complete the report, and forward the report over to the investigators. And it was sometime later where, I don't remember if it was that day or the next day, I want to say it was that same day, that I got a call from that same investigator, and he said, Brian, I just want to let you know that we've arrested the male that was on scene. And I said, can you tell me what happened? And he said, he beat that baby. Do what? He said, he beat that baby. He's the reason that baby wasn't breathing when you got there. And I remember immediately feeling angry, because who does that to a child? Who can do that to an 8-month-old child? I can't fathom, obviously in the line of work I'm in, I've come across it and I've dealt with it. But this was the first time I was really dealing with it like that. I mean, I've had other child abuse cases where it was a parent that, had disciplined the child too hard, but it was, marks and things like that on the child, not excusing it by any means. Please don't take it that way. But none to where the child stopped breathing. And I was immediately angry. Like, how could you do this? How could you do this to this baby? This baby did nothing. This baby did nothing to anyone. Didn't even ask to be here. And this is how you treat it. So move forward, and in the days and weeks that followed, I heard more and more about it. And the thoughts of what I saw never left my mind. Running into that house, seeing that baby on that counter, seeing that baby, lips turning blue, and having to do CPR for the first time ever in my life on a human being, and it's an 8-month-old child. Not that I think it would have been too terribly different had it been an adult, but this was a child. My general thought process is, as adults, we've kind of lived our lives. Not that we're, easily dispensable by any means, but a child, at the whole women and children first kind of thing, children haven't had a chance to live yet. They haven't had a chance to leave their mark on the world. They haven't had a chance to make a difference. That was big. It hit me deep. And full disclosure, I sometime thereafter that incident, I wound up driving down that stretch of road to where I was going to have to drive past that house. And as I passed by the house, I looked over and saw the house and saw the front door. And immediately I could see where my car was parked, and I could see the path that I ran to get to the house and the door that I went in. And I knew exactly from looking on the outside of the house, I knew exactly where that countertop was. Even though I couldn't see through the wall, I knew exactly where that countertop was in that house. I knew exactly where it was that I stood to do CPR on this 8-month-old baby. And I broke down. I'm driving alone in my car, and I broke down in tears, and I started crying because this 8-month-old baby, the baby survived, but he was a vegetable. He was brain dead. He was living off of machines. He was only alive because of machines. So I was told. And the only thing I could think of then was, what was it all for? What good did it do? What good did me doing CPR on that baby do for that child? I mean, even now it bothers me. But I asked myself, what was it for? This baby has no quality of life. This baby will never know what it's like to feel the wind across his face. Never know what it's like to feel a loved one's embrace. Never know what it's like to see a firefly at night. None of these things, because he's bedridden and machines are keeping him alive, because the man that was responsible for watching him beat him. It was a good solid year before I could drive past that house. It was a full year before I could drive past that house without breaking down. I didn't care what call I was going to. I would intentionally drive out of my way to keep from going down that small stretch of road, just so I didn't have to go past that house. Because every time I saw it, it was a memory of what I experienced and how that child was now having to live because of one person's, I hate to say it, but one person's evil intent. Come around time for the trial, and I was told that, obviously there were plenty of us subpoenaed for the case. And I was told that they played the body camera footage of my buddy that showed up, after I did. They played his body camera footage, and in the footage you can see me doing CPR, and in the audio you can hear me begging this baby to come back. You can hear me begging him to breathe. And I wasn't privy to it because we were sequestered. But I was told that there were jury members that started crying at that point because now they were seeing what I saw. They seeing what I had to do. They were seeing the shape that this baby was in. They were listening to this baby take these brief gasps of air and then listening to a grown man beg this baby to live. And it broke some of them down. I eventually got called and I testified. A lot of people testified in that case, a lot of experts and doctors and people that are way smarter than me. And the thing with trials is, once you're done testifying, once you're excused, you can sit through the court case. You can come back day for day, however much you need, want, whatever. You can come back because you're excused. They're not going to have any more questions for you. So there's no chance of contamination of testimonies or anything like that. And out of all of my years, even to now, 17 years into it, even to now, that is the only court case that I went back for. That's the only court case that I stayed for once I was excused. I was invested. I had to know what happened to that baby. And then I had to know what happened to the man that did it. And during that trial, I heard the experts testify. This 8-month-old baby had a skull fracture. 7, 8 months old with a skull fracture. One of the experts that was there expressed that because of how malleable a child that young's skull is, that to cause a fracture like that in that particular portion of that child's skull would be the equivalent of taking a 2-story fall from a balcony and hitting the head. When it was asked of how the child ended up with a skull fracture, it was said that the child was walking and fell and hit the fireplace. That math don't add up to me. They also found bite marks on the child, or a bite mark on the child. And there were reasons why they expressed why the bite mark was likely there. But it was said that, well, that's a child's bite mark. Well, they had expert testimony that there's no way that the only other child in the home caused that bite mark. The bite mark was entirely too large to be a child's bite mark. So they knew that it was an adult, which meant not only did this 8-month-old baby have a fractured skull, but was bitten by this man. So I sat there and I listened through the trial, and I listened to the testimonies of the experts and the testimonies of everybody else that was called in. And then I waited. The jury was given their orders, and they were excused to go to their deliberation room, and I waited with everyone else. Eventually, we got the notice that the jury had reached a decision, and we go back into the courtroom, and, I've never been on pins and needles more a day in my life. The reason why is because you never know what's going to happen with a jury trial. Sometimes, no matter how strong your evidence is, no matter how strong your testimony is, it's called a jury of your peers. It means the fate of the case lies in their hands and what they believe occurred based on the facts beyond a reasonable doubt. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much evidence you have, the jury goes the other way. Obviously, you can imagine that I didn't want the jury to go the other way in this one. All of the evidence, all of the facts pointed to this man hurt this child. And I didn't want him to get away with it. I didn't think it was right that he should be able to hurt this small child and then be able to live a free man. It just didn't seem right. So we sat there, and the jury's decision was read, and he was found guilty. He was found guilty of every charge, and he was sentenced to 60 years. This man, and I believe he was in his 20s, was sentenced to 60 years for what he did to this child. And to me, that wasn't long enough. But it was something. It was something for what he did to that child. You know, obviously, as you guys can see that, and maybe even hear, that even talking about it now, all these years later, and we're talking more than a decade, it still affects me. I will never forget that day in my life. I will never forget the panic I felt. I will never forget the things that I saw. I found out it was 3 years after the incident occurred that baby died. He lived 3 years after he was brutally assaulted, living on machines, being fed with a feeding tube. He lived 3 years. And it's hard now, even now, it's hard to think that the actions that all of us took that day, the actions I took, the ambulance took, or the EMTs, the doctors, we preserved that child's life 3 years to live on machines. No quality of life whatsoever. My wife has done the best she could to get me to rationalize it. And in her words, that was 3 years that child's mother and other family members that loved him wouldn't have gotten. They got those 3 years with him. And to some extent that, that makes it a little better, but not entirely. So even to this day, I will actually say I actually live on the same road now where that incident occurred. I can ride by there. I can look at the house. I don't get choked up about it anymore. Not by that. It's in moments like this. Moments like this when I'm speaking intimately about what I saw, what I felt, what I heard. It's in these moments that it chokes me up because I'll never forget it. It's made a lasting impact on my life. Eventually, when I told you that I couldn't even drive past the house, the only reason I was able to start was because I finally told myself, you've got to let go of it. It's already happened. There's nothing you can do to change it. You have to let go. You have to let go of that pain. You have to let go of those memories. And you have to get back to the job at hand. And one day I made the decision to drive past the house. And I did. I didn't avoid looking at the house. I looked straight at it. And I told myself, it's okay. It took me a year to get there. But I told myself it was okay. Because there's nothing I could have done differently. There's nothing I could have done that would have changed anything. It was okay. I could let it go. But I won't ever forget it. So There you go. That is one moment out of probably many in my life that impacted me deeply and helped shape me and form me in who I am today. How I approach situations, how I handle situations, how I prepare for situations. It also taught me that you have to let it go. You can't hold on to it forever. You know, at the end of the day, that wasn't my child. So I had to let it go. So, guys, I don't know how or who that story can help, but I hope it can. And I hope that if you're dealing with something like this, or God forbid you have to deal with something like this, that maybe you can reflect back on the story I shared. And maybe it can help you get through it too. So, till next time, guys, appreciate you jumping in, appreciate you listening, and appreciate your time. Catch you on the next one.